Vanessa's eyes locked with Garrick's. No words passed between them, but in that silent exchange, a verdict had already been reached. She took one deliberate step forward, then another, each click of her heels against the floor counted down like a timer. And then, in a move no one anticipated, she ascended the judge's bench and sat in the chair reserved for one person alone, the presiding judge. The realization exploded through the room. A clerk whispered in stunned disbelief. She's Judge Morgan." Garrick stood frozen, his face draining of color as 20 years of untouchable privilege suddenly felt very touchable indeed. "Officer Garrick," Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, low and composed. "You just struck someone in this courtroom. I'll ask you a simple question. Do you deny that action?" he stammered, desperately trying to regain control. "I didn't know you were. I thought you were." Vanessa leaned toward the microphone, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not asking who you thought I was. I'm asking, did you hit me? Yes or no?" Phones were already recording. A journalist hit their camera button. A fellow officer in the back lowered his head, wanting no part in what was unfolding. "I did touch you." Garrick swallowed hard, "but only because you weren't answering me. Not because I didn't answer," Vanessa cut in, sharp as a blade, "but because you thought I wasn't worth answering." That sentence hit the courtroom like a gavel strike. No jury needed, no debate required. Just truth, raw and undeniable. Garrick looked around desperately for an ally, but all eyes were cast down. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, as if etching his expression into memory. "If I were a white man," she said slowly, "wearing a judge's robe from the beginning, already seated here, would you have dared raise your hand?" His silence answered louder than any words could have. No robe needed, no title required. Judge Vanessa Morgan had just shaken the very foundation of every unspoken power dynamic in that room, simply by standing her ground. And that was only the beginning. What happens when a single moment of truth exposes decades of lies? The system fights back, and it fights dirty. Within hours, Judge Morgan's office transformed into a command center. Her trusted security assistant, Jason Rivera, gathered every case file connected to Officer Garrick from the past decade. Not just cases he handled directly, but every instance where he served as witness, informant, or where his reports had fast-tracked prosecutions. What emerged wasn't a single smoking gun, but an entire arsenal of corruption. 4 lawsuits mysteriously closed under insufficient evidence. 2 body camera videos vanished from databases. Every questionable case signed off by the same name, Assistant District Attorney Anthony Wells. "We're not dealing with a bad apple anymore," Vanessa told Jason, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of discovery. "We've uncovered the entire orchard." Outside, social media exploded with the hashtag #SheDidNotFlinch. The video of a black female judge taking her rightful seat after being assaulted went viral. Questions multiplied. Why would a veteran officer strike someone in a courtroom? The answers weren't in headlines. They were buried in case files, forgotten signatures, and trials that never received justice. That evening, as the courthouse emptied, Vanessa sat alone at her oak desk, surrounded by towers of evidence that mapped a network of protection reaching higher than she had dared imagine. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. No text, just a photo of her 10-year-old nephew riding his bike home from school. Below the image, 5 words scrawled in black: "Stay in your lane." No direct threat, no signature, but the message was unmistakable. Back off or else. For Vanessa, they could come at her. That was one thing. But threatening her family, that crossed a line they would soon wish they hadn't. She didn't respond with fear. She responded with fury. A cold, calculated rage that could level buildings. "If they think a picture will make me back down," she whispered to herself, "then they've never understood what women like me are made of." That night, she submitted an emergency petition to the United States Department of Justice, demanding federal protection for her family, an investigation into Garrick and his associates, and a freeze on all cases bearing ADA Wells' signature related to Garrick. A second message arrived. "You need to stop now." Vanessa simply turned up the lights in her office. If they intended to threaten her with darkness, she would be the first to flood the room with light. What happens when those meant to uphold justice become its greatest threat? The answer might shock you, but not as much as what comes next. The next morning, Federal Agent Sophia Chen arrived with a sealed file bearing the DOJ's urgent stamp. Inside, satellite images, call transcripts, and an audio recording extracted from the police department's internal surveillance. Garrick's voice laughing in what sounded like a locker room. "That Morgan woman thinks her robe makes her untouchable. Let her try to come at me. I've got friends way higher up than she is." Then another male voice. "If needed, one complaint is all it takes. She'll disappear just like the others." But what truly shook Vanessa was a name she hadn't expected to see. Judge Richard Lancaster. Once her mentor. Once the man who called her the shining hope of Seattle's legal world. Now linked to 3 separate authorizations to delete internal investigation files concerning Garrick. All without justification. All connected to cases flagged for potential coercion. Vanessa closed her eyes, not from shock but because the part of her that once believed in protection had just gone silent. "Start with the weakest link," Agent Chen asked. "Not Garrick," Vanessa replied. "Wells." That afternoon, a federal task force stormed ADA Anthony Wells' office. No knock, no warning, no time to delete files. Wells was taken quietly, but the panic in his eyes said everything. He had always known this day might come. He just never expected it from Vanessa Morgan. Within hours the phone rang, not an unknown number, but a voice Vanessa knew all too well. "Vanessa." Lancaster's voice was calm, almost paternal. "Richard," she replied. "You're digging into places very deep," he said, as if they were having a casual conversation about gardening rather than corruption. "I know, and you understand the consequences." Vanessa took a deep breath, her voice neither raised nor cold, but solid as stone. "I understand that if I don't dig, the next person harmed could be my nephew." Lancaster sighed. "No rebuttal. Get ready. This system doesn't break apart politely." The call ended. That night, Wells broke. He gave names, 7 of them. 3 senior officers, 2 prosecutors, 1 city council member, and Judge Richard Lancaster. Vanessa looked out at the Seattle rain streetlights smearing across her window. Those names weren't just people, they were fortresses. The moment she began dismantling their foundations, someone would gladly burn the whole city just to keep the truth buried. But she was ready to light the match herself. The most dangerous moment isn't when systems fight back. It's when they try to destroy your credibility before you can expose theirs. The next morning, the courthouse wasn't a place of bureaucratic ritual. It was a battlefield. When Vanessa entered the special hearing room, she wore no judge's robe. She didn't need it. She didn't sit on the elevated bench. She wasn't representing the system today. She was standing against it. Before her sat Thomas Bennett, representative of the State Ethics Commission, with his rehearsed smile and perfect suit. Beside him, the interim district attorney replacing the now cooperating Wells. Vanessa stood when asked to state the purpose of the hearing. No notes, no spokesperson, just truth in human form. "I submitted a formal request to recuse myself from Officer Brian Garrick's case," she began, her voice soft but cutting. "Not because I lost emotional control, but because I refused to let this case be buried quietly in a back room, with a few lines of record no one will ever read." She looked directly at Bennett, then turned toward the press seated in the back rows. "I request that this case be classified as a matter of special review. I request an independent federal investigation into all cases involving Officer Garrick. I request a full review of all actions from 2013, the year Garrick was promoted, until now. I demand the reopening of at least 7 cases dismissed without hearings." The interim DA cleared his throat. "Judge Morgan, I must remind you that you are a victim in this matter, and that may compromise impartiality." Vanessa interrupted him, not with words but with her gaze. Then she spoke calmly. "I'm not requesting an investigation because I was struck. I'm requesting it because I am the only surviving witness who still holds the key to this room where too many bodies have been hidden in the dark." She opened her leather case. Inside, 3 complaints closed due to lack of evidence. 5 audio recordings removed from original files. 2 missing video clips, now recovered. "All have one thing in common," she said, her voice lowering. "They bear the signature of Anthony Wells. And in some documents there's a second signature. Do you know whose?" She locked eyes with Bennett. "Judge Richard Lancaster." A gasp echoed through the room. You'll also find, she continued, pointing to the file, the name of a city council member who redirected legal budget into a police protection fund, a supervising officer who was once Garrick's direct superior, and a legal advisor to the Law Enforcement Protection Fund, where $500,000 in city funds disappeared without a trace. Bennett slowly flipped through the pages, his face paling, not from fear of Vanessa, but because he knew each signature was a clean cut through those who once believed themselves untouchable. Finally, Vanessa looked directly into the television camera live streaming from the back. "This is not about me," she said. "This is about all of you. If justice does not protect those who enforce the law when they do the right thing, then it is no longer law. It is power, and power without ethics is just violence." The entire room fell silent. Not the silence of doubt, but the silence that comes when a system realizes it has been called out by name. When you threaten power, power doesn't just fight back. It attempts to erase you from history. As the sun set, an exclusive article appeared on a tabloid site. Judge Vanessa Morgan accused of bias in 2009 ruling. Justice or personal agenda? The piece rehashed a case closed a decade ago, implying impropriety with no evidence or concrete sources. Just questions designed to plant doubt. Within 24 hours, social media flooded with hashtags like #ActivistJudge and #MorganBias. Old college photos of Vanessa at civil rights protests were recirculated, now labeled radical and anti-police. A major news network aired a blurry clip of her at a fundraiser hosted by an organizer who, a year later, had been investigated for misuse of funds. They didn't claim Vanessa was involved. They simply asked, did Judge Morgan know? Vanessa wasn't surprised. When you pull back the curtain on power, those who hide in shadows don't bow. They throw mud. But what they didn't know was that she hadn't come to the hearing with just Garrick's files. At 3 a.m., after watching 3 fabricated news segments and receiving 2 more anonymous messages, she unlocked a drawer in her office. Inside, a black fabric-bound notebook. Not a diary, but a logbook. Notes on hallway conversations. Suggestions from colleagues about cases that should be handled gently. VIP names whispered through wine glasses at legal galas. One name appeared repeatedly: Lancaster. But alongside it were others. A member of the Judicial Nomination Committee. A lawyer once nominated for U.S. Attorney who was rejected at the last minute. A journalist, Rachel Lynn, who investigated missing records and then went missing herself weeks later. Vanessa had quietly collected it all, piece by piece, as if she had always known this day would come. She photographed each page with an encrypted phone, sending them directly to Agent Chen with a single note. When they think I've lost control, show them I've only just begun. That afternoon, Jason entered with a grave look. Vanessa, they're calling your nephew a brainwashed child now. Vanessa didn't react immediately. She looked Jason in the eye and said, good. He frowned, confused. If they're aiming at children now, she explained, it means they've run out of bullets for me. She handed him a USB drive. This contains everything: backup files, recordings, testimonies, camera footage. If I go dark, you'll know what to do. What are you planning to do next? He asked. Vanessa looked out the window where thousands continued to live in faith of a justice system they had never truly seen. I'm going to clear the table, she said, her voice low but sharp as steel. If they want to fight in the dark, I'll drag everything into the light. No more deals, no more saving face. I'm going to show this city who got their hands dirty and exactly when the blood began to stain their robes. What would you do if you discovered the very people meant to protect justice were the ones destroying it? Would you stay silent, or would you risk everything to speak truth? The steps of King County Courthouse were packed with people, the air tense like still water before a storm. Some held signs, justice for all or justice for none. Others carried photos of loved ones whose cases were never properly investigated. All waited for one person, Vanessa Morgan. When she emerged, she wore no robe, just a simple black suit, high-necked, no jewelry. She wasn't there to claim glory. She was there to point directly at the wreckage masked as law. Cameras zoomed in, microphones pointed toward every word. But Vanessa didn't look at the lenses. She looked at the faces below, people holding their breath, not out of reverence, but from something rarer, hope. Nearly 3 weeks ago, she began. I was struck inside a courtroom, but the deepest pain that day wasn't the slap. It was the silence that followed from those who should have spoken up long before. She lifted a thin silver-gray folder. I present here a list of 12 individuals who used their positions of power to protect one another, erase evidence, distort justice, and turn this court into a personal weapon. 7 are officers, 2 are prosecutors, 1 is a city council advisor. And the most painful of all, 1 is the man who once called me his student. No one spoke, but an emotional wave swept through the crowd. I've submitted this file to the Department of Justice, requesting a criminal investigation into all cases involving the individuals named within. I won't read their names here, not out of fear, but because I believe in something more important than reputation: transparent process. Something they themselves have trampled on for years. She looked directly at the reporters in the front row. This is no longer about a slap. This is about the system that allowed it to happen, then covered it up, then went silent. This is a reminder that justice isn't a symbol. It's a choice made by every person in these buildings every day between 2 things: what's easy and what's right. Someone shouted, "We believe in you." Others joined. Vanessa is not alone. A wave of applause broke out, not wild or chaotic, but steady and resolute, like the first steps of a long march. Back in her office, Jason waited with a manila envelope from the federal investigators. Inside, Garrick's testimony, now formally admitting to collusion, illegal fund payments, and evidence tampering in at least 5 cases. She nodded, then said softly, "A stone just dropped into the lake. Now we wait to see how far the ripples go." But what truly caught her off guard wasn't the confession. It was the message from the DOJ. Judge Lancaster has submitted his resignation. She didn't feel triumph. She felt hollow. This wasn't just the fall of a man. It was the collapse of a symbol she once believed in. Proof that power, if left unchecked, will rot from within. Days later, Vanessa stepped into the courtroom, not to sit on the judge's bench, but to place a letter before the State Judicial Council. "I am resigning," she said, her voice unwavering. "Not because I've given up on justice, but because I lit the fire, and no one should stand in the middle of that flame for too long. Justice doesn't need monuments. It needs new hands, people willing to lift every stone and ask, what exactly are we building here?" The council remained silent. No one tried to stop her. They understood Vanessa Morgan wasn't leaving the system because she had fallen. She was leaving to prove that justice doesn't live in chairs, but in how we rise from them, with heads held high and hands unsoiled by blood. Weeks later, the press called her the woman who kicked open a door locked for 2 decades. The media hailed her as a hero. But in a small house on a quiet street in North Seattle, Vanessa sat on the front steps with her nephew, watching him ride circles in the yard. "Auntie," he said, "I saw you on TV. You made them listen." Vanessa smiled, her gaze distant. "No, sweetheart, I just made them look. Listening. That's something they'll have to learn on their own." A soft wind passed under the porch. The sunset cast a warm glow on the silver strands in the hair of the woman who once stood against an entire city. She closed her eyes, not from fatigue, but from peace. Because finally, light had reached places where there had only ever been darkness, and this time it stayed. If this story resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button now and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. The truth only has power when it's spoken aloud. In the comments below, tell me, what would you have done in Judge Morgan's position? Would you have risked everything for justice, or played it safe? Remember, new stories of courage and truth drop every Wednesday, and the next one might be even more shocking than this. Subscribe now so you don't miss it.